Hey folks, I'm JC, and today I'm going to give you Game Masters some tips on how to run one of my favorite fantasy adventures of all time, Enemy in Shadows, a complex and sinister adventure set in the old world of the Warhammer universe. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with Enemy in Shadows, it's the first adventure in a longer campaign called The Enemy Within, which, when it comes to epic RPG campaigns, it usually always makes it on the top 10 lists. It's a classic for a reason, written way back when in 1987 and reprinted so many times since then. Enemy in Shadows is filled with intrigue, cultists, mutants, and a lot of other surprises. I really think it should be on every fantasy GM's bucket list, right up there with early classics like Ravenloft and Masks of Nyarlathotep and the Great Pendragon campaign. But unlike some of those lengthier adventures, you can run Enemy in Shadows without committing to the entire 5-part campaign. It's really quite standalone, and it's pretty easy to port it to other RPG systems. I've run Enemy in Shadows 3 times over the last few years, and in 2 different game systems. Warhammer Fantasy, of course, which is what it was written for, and also most recently I ran it using GURPS. It's really easy to port this adventure to whatever you like, as long as the system you're using is like gritty and death is just around the corner. So I think it would even work for 5th edition if you go ahead and use mods like Hardcore 5e or Deathbringer. Now, as great as Enemy in Shadows is, it's not always the easiest adventure to GM, mostly because the books always seem to lack a good summary of how the adventure should run, and also because there's several moments in this adventure where players can very easily lose the trail of the main mystery and get a little lost. But I'm here to help. So this video is not going to be a full review of Enemy in Shadows, but I will give a quick summary of the adventure and then leap into my 5 best tips on how to run this epic adventure like a pro. However, be aware that there are some serious spoilers ahead, so if you're wanting to play in this legendary adventure, you better turn around before Tzeentch, the Lord of Entropy and Master of Mutations, curses you with a deformity so horrible that dogs will wail and children will howl when they see the horror you've become. You ready? Let's go. Enemy in Shadows has one of my favorite openings of an adventure. The PCs are all ordinary folks who are desperate to leave the countryside and head to the great capital city of the empire, Altdorf. They hop on a coach, but within a few hours they stumble across another coach that's been ambushed by mutants. And after defeating these unnatural bandits, the PCs make a shocking discovery, because a corpse from the original ambush of that coach looks exactly like one of the PCs. And the body of this doppelganger, whose name apparently was Castor Lieberung, bears a letter that says that he's inherited a massive estate. And all he had to do was go south to the town of Bogenhofen, present a few of the letters that he has on him, and he would claim it as his own. Now, every time my players realize that they have like a free mansion just waiting for them in Bogenhofen, they jump at the chance to claim it as their own. And it's such a great start to the adventure because it immediately puts an objective that sounds fun and rewarding just out of reach of the players. Now, what the players don't know is that this dead man, Castor Lieberung, was a notorious cult leader. And this whole thing is actually a sting operation. Castor Lieberung was being lured to Bogenhofen to be ambushed by this bounty hunter who's been tracking him for some time. So getting to Bogenhofen takes about a week or so, and when the players finally reach civilization, they'll be surprised to find that they're being contacted by these cultists who don't realize that the real Castor Lieberung is dead. And so these cultists will constantly kind of pop out of little places in the cities and make hand signals and like try to get the PC's attention and just be really confused when the PC who looks like Castor Lieberung just doesn't know how to respond to these guys. And soon the PCs will find that these cultists are dead, killed by that bounty hunter so that they can get to Bogenhofen safely. And this whole setup and beginning this adventure is just so weird and mysterious and filled with coincidences that are going to make your players suspicious and wonder what the heck they've stumbled into. Once the players finally reach Bogenhofen, they'll find themselves in the middle of the great Schaffenfest, this huge festival. And soon they'll discover that inheritance is a fake out. They'll go to the office to claim it, and they'll get ambushed by that bounty hunter, and they'll realize that this was not turning out the way they wanted. However, unwittingly, they've now been delivered to the middle of another great conspiracy. Because in 3 days, the local guild leader of Bogenhofen, Karl Teugen, plans to perform a ritual to free himself from a bargain that he made with a demon, Gideon, 7 years ago. A bargain that made Teugen fantastically rich, but at the cost of his soul. The demon, however, being a reasonable servant of Tzeentch, he wasn't, offers Teugen a way out of this bargain. He isn't. If Teugen sacrifices 7 others in this elaborate ritual, Teugen will get to keep his soul and escape his fate. But of course, you should never trust a demon because he's actually tricking Teugen. And the ritual that Teugen thinks is going to let him get his soul back will actually open up a giant portal to hell, which will overwhelm the town with hundreds, if not thousands, of demons, which could jeopardize the entire empire itself.
Oh yes, this was a very clever plan of mine. Like, here, do this ritual, it'll save your soul. And really, it's demon portal to hell. But it's really a very basic demon trick taught by Tzeentch. Like, he teaches this to everyone. It's very simple. And by the way, why isn't any of the other chaos demons in these adventures? It's always Tzeentch. Like, there's Nurgle, and where's Slanesh? Well, we know where Slanesh is, let me tell you.
And the PCs stumble into this whole mystery during Schaffenfest. And they stumble their way in when a 3-legged carnival goblin escapes from the Schaffenfest and dashes into the sewers. And the PCs are paid to go find that goblin, and there in the sewers they stumble upon the hidden temple where this ritual is being prepared. And this leads into a giant sandbox investigation where the PCs have 3 days to unmask Teugen and his followers and stop the town from getting destroyed. And to do this, the PCs have to talk with lots of NPCs and follow leads. And if you've played a game like Call of Cthulhu that's all about an investigation with lots of clues and events that are going to lead the players in different directions, that's what this entire adventure then opens up to in its last third. So the fact that Enemy in Shadows so deftly intertwines role-playing, investigation, brutal fights, and plot twists makes it such a classic. Once the adventure gets to Bogenhofen, the players just have a crazy amount of agency to uncover Teugen's plot and a real time limit to do it. But Enemy in Shadows is also a dense adventure, and it has some moments where players can lose the trail and lose momentum, especially if they miss a clue or two along the way. So here's my top 5 tips on how to make this adventure run smoothly. Tip number 1, pick the Doppelganger carefully. The adventure's opening hinges on that shocking discovery that one of the PCs is a look-alike for the cult leader Castor Lieberung, who's just inherited a massive estate ready to be claimed in Bogenhofen. About half this adventure is driven by the idea that the PCs will greedily make their way towards Bogenhofen to claim this inheritance. But if this PC dies, or the player himself or herself gets busy and misses a session or two, the adventure can grind to a halt. So GMs have to pick this central player very carefully. Pick your most reliable player who never misses a session and who also has a tough and hardy character that's unlikely to be killed by a stray arrow in the early events of the adventure. Did you hear, my friends? I, Castor Lieberung, have inherited a grand estate, and now we shall go on an epic adventure for me to claim it, and you shall help in this long journey that will only end. And if by chance that character does die, you're going to have to do some creative GMing here. This happened to me once, but one preventative measure that I take is that I put a silver signet ring on Castor Lieberung's corpse. And then, should the Doppelganger player die or be unable to continue in the game, I remind the other players that there's this obscure imperial law that says the next of kin can potentially claim this kind of estate with proof of the relationship, and then that signet ring might just be good enough proof for them to claim the inheritance. Then you just have to assume that the bounty hunter who is after Castor Lieberung assumes that he's been killed by a traitorous cult backstabbing and replaced by another person who's now the leader of this cult. And of course, he assumes that one of the PCs must be that new leader, and then the adventure can continue just fine. Tip number 2, introduce those merchant houses early on. Key to this whole adventure is the fact that the elite leaders of Bogenhafen's merchant houses are conspiring with each other to do these terrible, nefarious things like cast a potentially world-ending ritual. Now, 3 of these leaders are absolutely critical to the adventure. You have Teugen, who is the brains behind the whole plot, the Steinhagers, these 2 brothers who are lending their real estate to the scheme, and Magirius, who is in on the plan but will get cold feet later on and narc on his friends, which is going to give the PC some key clues that they need to figure out where the ritual is taking place. These are all powerful men who are not easily accessible. And because they're all greedy merchants, it's easy for players to kind of confuse them all with each other. So to reduce confusion, I always introduce these merchant houses like right away in the adventure as early as I can. So as the PCs head towards Bogenhafen, I often have Josef, who's the captain of the barge that they take to the town, ask one of the PCs for help in delivering his cargo to Bogenhafen. He's carrying some rare wine. And I say that he needs to deliver them to the Steinhager brothers at one of their warehouses, but he's a little nervous about the meeting, so that's why he wants to bring one of the PCs as kind of a trusty lieutenant to this. Then I have Josef, of course, explain how Franz Steinhager, who's the older brother, has just gotten richer and richer and greedier over the years and more callous. And he used to not be this way, but just tip off the PCs that the merchants are really just getting rich and over their skis a little bit here in Bogenhafen. And then when they meet Steinhager to unload the wine, Steinhager tells Josef that he needs his promise to never sell anything to a competitor, Rugbroder, another merchant leader who's kind of on the outs with these guys. And I have the Steinhager act all just callous and cutthroat. And this introduction scene, even though it probably only takes 10 or 15 minutes of time, just immediately gives the PCs some context and face time with some of the key characters. And so when the investigation gets underway, they already kind of have a face with a name in this adventure. And then you can also use that scene to explain some other things. You can have servants kind of say oh yeah, Steinhager and Teugen are really close and they don't like this Rugbroder guy, and that the 2 Steinhager, the 2 brothers can make snarky comments at each other at this meeting, which plays on later when you discover the younger brother kind of wants to off the older brother. But anyway, this one meeting early on is just going to really help the PCs just get better context into the merchant rivalries that is going to really play out later in the adventure. Tip number 3, give the characters more reasons to stay in Bogenhafen. Enemy in Shadows relies on that handoff between the first part of the adventure to the second part of the adventure, and that handoff can be tricky. This is likely because this adventure was originally 2 adventures that have been smashed together, and the stitching just isn't perfect. So 90% of the time, the players will arrive in Bogenhafen and head right to the lawyer's office to claim that amazing estate and discover it's all a ruse. Now, from there, the PCs will likely head over to Schaffenfest and get caught up in the whole plot with the escaped goblin and soon realize that the demons of chaos are somehow making their way into the city. But unless the PCs have just a general desire to stop chaos, they have little motivation to stay in Bogenhafen after their estate is discovered to be fake. And even after they find that demonic temple in the sewers, it's not immediately obvious why the players should just care to track down the mystery of who set up that temple. Honestly, there's so many weird evil temples and sewers in RPGs these days that this may not even seem that unusual to players. So I've had some PCs when they play this just kind of go, cool, we visited the sewers, found that temple. Well, this is on the Bogenhafen authorities. We'll let them know and let's go figure out some other town to go visit. And you don't really want that to happen. So it's important to keep the PCs motivated to stay in Bogenhofen, investigate this weird activity, and be motivated to save the city from a chaos incursion. I do this in a couple different ways. First, when the PCs arrive in Bogenhofen, I say that the opening day of the Schaffenfest has closed many of the businesses. It's sort of like a public holiday. Nothing is open because of Schaffenfest. This means that the players won't be able to go to the law offices on that very first day, giving them a chance to explore Schaffenfest and get embroiled in some of the characters and the mysteries before they hit the dead end at the law offices. Second, I always try to give at least one of the PCs family in town. Like when they arrive, have the PCs greeted by a pack of young cousins who invite them to dinner on one of the nights and tell them all about the local news in Bogenhofen. This is also a great opportunity to fill the players more in on kind of what's going on with the merchant rivalries in town, like how Karl Teugen has gotten rich and he's never seen during the day. There's a whole vampire rumor about him. It's not true, but it's kind of fun to play with. And how his brother mysteriously died a little while ago. Oh, and how the Stevedores Guild is striking, etc. This just gives the players more opportunity to learn about the town and also give the PC some contacts where if they ever need some help, they have this family to run back to. And then, of course, when they discover that the whole town might be in danger, they're motivated to save it because they have family there. This works really well. Steal this. Tip number 4, don't use all the side quests in this adventure. Oh, and use Gideon for more murder. You're going to see how this makes sense in a second. Enemy in Shadows is chock full of side quests. Some of them are fun and pull the PCs deeper into the underworld of the town and add more backstory, but others, like finding livestock at the festival, are just distracting and probably not that exciting for most groups. So here's what I trim. First, I treat Altdorf as a quick stopover. This is like the first city the players get to, and you really want them to get to Bogenhofen as soon as possible. So I usually just focus Altdorf on like seeing the Emperor, which plays into one of the other games if you're going to play the campaign, and meeting Josef the boatman, who's like very important NPC in this adventure, and having the PCs flee the town after a brawl, like in one of the inns. Like just keep this really tight to maybe like half a session at the most. Second, I ignore most of the Schaffenfest side quests. Of course, I use Dr. Malthusius and the three-legged goblin, but that's like mandatory to this adventure, so not even a side quest, so we shouldn't even count that. I also like to make a big deal about Crusher Braun. He's this fun character that's like this like wrestler and center of attention, and he's a celebrity, and it'll make him somebody the PCs just want to challenge or befriend. I find that he's just a great NPC to kind of put the spotlight on. And he can also provide some extra muscle at the end of the adventure if the PCs need it, because the final fight can get a little tough. So bring along a champion wrestler and everything will probably go better. But I ignore all of the tournaments, the livestock searches, the pickpockets and thieves and all that. Like, just trust me, your players will appreciate you kind of keeping them on the main mystery of the adventure. Because once they wander away from the main plot in this one, it's tough to get them like hooked back on it again, especially since there's a 3-day time limit. And even if they lose a day doing jousting, then there's a good chance like demons will swarm into the town and just murder everybody. Also, once the players find the hidden temple in the sewers, I like to think that Gideon, the demon, is onto the players and their investigation. And so to further focus the investigation when I need it, I use Gideon to brutally kill off any NPCs that the players take interest in. For example, one time my players did get a little too obsessed with Crusher Braun, the star wrestler, and they became like so obsessed with him they were like setting up his matches and trying to rig them, and then they were trying to like fight him and take his. It was just crazy and messy, and it was distracting them from the actual investigation. So one day Crusher Braun just turns up dead, his heart like ripped out, and a bloody note in his hands with one of the PC's names on it. And now the authorities are questioning what happened, and the players feel like they're being targeted and somebody's out to get them, which of course somebody was. And this just focused the adventure. And this is the feel you want to capture in Enemy in Shadows, that you can't trust anyone and there's just somebody watching you and like murdering people around you. So use Gideon if the players start to get off track. Just kill off some of those NPCs. It'll be great. Tip number 5. Teugen's plot isn't clear, but you can fix this with some nice new handouts. Enemy in Shadows has many layers of deceit piled up in its like main plot. Toygan has sold his soul, and now he wants to trick other merchants in sacrificing themselves to get his soul back, but the demon Gideon is plotting to use that ritual to actually open up a demonic gate in the city. But the adventure as written makes it difficult for the PCs to actually uncover that plot and see all those layers of deceit behind that final ritual. I've had groups get to the end, stop the ritual, and then kind of admit they had no clue why any of the merchants were doing what they were doing. I don't understand how anybody couldn't follow my plan. This is very simple. It started 7 years ago, involved many correspondences with a woman. That's not even in the adventure, but it's pretty simple. And there's a demon behind the whole thing, but he lies all the time, that's true. And it involves all my friends who are these merchant leaders of a town you've never heard of. And really, come on, what's not to follow? And from what I've read from other groups playing Enemy in Shadows, I think that this is more common than you'd want it to be. So GMs give the players more opportunities to uncover the tangles of deceit here. Credit to this next idea, by the way, comes from the Awesome Lies blog, which is this wonderful website that details so many ways to run Enemy in Shadows better. You should go check that out. There's a link in the description. Awesome Lies' suggestion is to create new correspondences between Toygan and Etelka. She's this off-camera figure who's mailing Toygan these rituals and helping him figure out how to control this demon. And when you have the two of them write more letters back and forth to each other, where Toygan is saying how he's tricking the evil merchants and it's gonna be great, he's gonna get his soul back, the players will more clearly figure out what's going on. Now, these handouts are not in the adventure, so you have to create your own to really detail this out, and it's totally worth doing. And then once you've created these handouts, you can find clever ways of getting them to the PCs right before the ritual. I often put one of these correspondences in Magirius's house. So when he's murdered by Gideon, the PCs can find it. Maybe he stole it from Toygan, and they'll realize what's going on and why Magirius got cold feet and why he was murdered. Or you can have Rugbroder, that merchant that dislikes Toygan. He's not involved in the plot, but he just kind of hates everybody. He can ask the PCs to stop one of Toygan's messengers as he heads out of town. And in the messenger's bag is a letter to Etelka, thanking her for everything he's shown him. And this will also reveal Toygan's plot. These extra handouts are just key to the players understanding the stakes behind that final ritual. And you can not only visit Awesome Lies blog, but you can download some of the ones that I've created on my blog. And there's a link to that in the description below too. Well, those are my top 5 tips, but I'm so excited. I've got some more rapid fire tips I'm going to just rattle off really fast. First, I've heard that some groups set a watch in the sewers after they find the temple, and some people say that this ruins the whole adventure because now the cult will get caught as they move all the stuff out of that temple to the warehouse where the final ritual will take place. But nonsense. Sewers in the old world are disease-ridden, horrible places. Make it clear to the players that if they set up a watch down there, it's likely they'll come down with purple brain fever or something worse and then follow through on that threat. Etelka. Oh, Etelka. If you have any chance of playing the sequel adventure to this one, Death on the Reich, please, please, please make Etelka more of a thing. The entire next adventure is all about finding Etelka, but if the PCs don't remember her name from that one note that they find in the adventure, they'll begin the next adventure with just no motivation. So use Etelka's name a lot in this adventure. I've already described how you can create some more correspondences between Toygan and Etelka, but have the merchants whisper how Toygan worships this Etelka person. He's always writing her and he's getting gifts from her. And in the final confrontation at the warehouse, have Toygan dramatically announce that Mistress Etelka has shown him the secrets of all things dark and that this is only the beginning. And she's planning on sending magical scrolls containing evil rituals all over the empire. The more you play up Etelka, the better that this one will end on a cliffhanger and Death on the Reich will kick off that much better. Oh, and have Josef, the friendly captain of the barge that the PCs take to Bogenhofen, volunteer to help stop the ritual at the end. He's a friendly guy. He's one of the few NPCs the players can entirely trust. And so have him volunteer with maybe a couple of his crewmen to help stop the ritual. And then during the battle, have Josef severely wounded or killed off. Because not only does the final battle need some extra emotional heft to have Josef there, I don't want him to get into too much trouble and get himself accidentally killed, but it gives him a good reason to give up his boat to the PCs after he dies or after he retires, which also sets up the next adventure, Death on the Reich, perfectly. And Gideon is a shapeshifter. Use that one for fun. Have him impersonate Crusher Braun one night, or have this weird beady-eyed servant that he likes to play just kind of show up and say some wildly inappropriate things when no one else is listening, or have him impersonate one of the PCs at weird opportunities, have an NPC say, "Oh, you were so awesome in the tavern last night, that joke you told was great," and players are like, "What?" The more you can make your players think that there's just creepy, weird stuff happening around them in Bogenhofen, the more they'll get into wanting to stop the central conspiracy. And that's it for my top tips for running one of my favorite adventures, Enemy in Shadows. If you found these tips helpful and want to see more videos like this, don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you've run Enemy in Shadows, I'd love to know what your experience was like. Let me know in the comments below. Share some of your own tips. And for you GURPS fans, I've uploaded the GURPS versions of all the characters to my blog, which you can also check out in the link in the description below. Until next time, I'm JC, and just remember, an apple a day keeps the purple brain fever away.
If you've made it to the end of this video, I must reveal to you that it is I, Gideon, who has been giving you these tips. And if you've listened to this point, then my curse has already taken hold of you, and you feel a strong desire to run the worst fantasy adventure ever written for the old world. Something rotten in Kislev. Enjoy your next campaign, Game Masters.